the serenity of the retreat. Spring 1983 greeted me with a warm embrace in Bradenton, Florida. The sun, a radiant golden orb, rose leisurely, bathing the Christian retreat in a warm glow. This place, nestled in Manatee County, was alive with vibrant greens and the rich hues of blooming azaleas and camellias, painting the landscape in bursts of color. The retreat, steeped in history and encircled by dense pine forests, had long been my sanctuary. The old oaks, with their moss-draped branches, stood like silent guardians, swaying gently in the breeze. The air resonated with the sweet chorus of birds, providing a harmonious soundtrack to this tranquil place. At the heart of the retreat lay the Manatee River, a meandering ribbon of water that sliced through the landscape. Its banks, adorned with reeds and cattails, mirrored the clear blue of the spring sky. This river was not just a body of water. It was a life source, a soothing companion to those who visited the retreat. In the northwest corner of the property, where the retreat met the densest part of the pine forest, there was a hidden gem cherished by locals, a secluded fishing spot. Here, the river bent gracefully, forming a natural alcove surrounded by tall pines and dense underbrush. This place wasn't just beautiful, it was a haven of peace, treasured for the solitude and the abundant fish in its depths. I, a 17-year-old with a passion for fishing and a deep bond with the retreat, found my sanctuary here. I had spent my childhood roaming these woods, discovering every secret path and hidden nook. To me, the retreat was more than a location. It was an integral part of my soul, a backdrop for my fondest childhood memories. On this particular spring morning, the retreat seemed to come alive with a sense of expectancy. The towering pine trees, with their whispering needles, appeared to be guarding age-old secrets. A profound stillness hung in the air, filled with quiet anticipation as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a golden light across the forest. As I set out that morning, my fishing gear in hand and my heart brimming with eagerness, I had no idea that this day would be unlike any other. The retreat, with its serene beauty and hidden depths, was on the brink of revealing a facet of nature, both terrifying and awe-inspiring, an experience that would forever alter the course of my life. The Young Angler's Sanctuary. My bond with this place wasn't just passing, it was deep and rooted, nurtured through countless days spent in its embrace. As a child, I roamed these grounds with the unrestrained curiosity of youth. My laughter echoed through the trees and along the riverbanks. The retreat was my playground, my classroom, and my refuge. Beneath the watchful eyes of the towering pines and beside the gentle flow of the Manatee River, I learned to fish, appreciate the quiet, and understand the subtle language of nature. Fishing was more than a hobby for me. It was a ritual, a time for contemplation and connection with the world around me. My haven was a fishing spot nestled in the northwest corner of the retreat. There, sitting on a corrugated pipe stretching over the water, I found peace in the rhythmic sound of the river and the whispers of the wind through the pines. Even as I grew older, the retreat remained a constant in my life. The familiar paths, the scent of pine needles, and the soothing sound of the river greeted me like old friends. I respected the wilderness, understanding its balance and beauty. The retreat, a blend of spiritual serenity and natural wonder, had shaped me in ways I couldn't fully articulate. This particular morning, as I made my way to my cherished fishing spot, I felt a blend of nostalgia and excitement for a day spent fishing. The retreat, with its sprawling grounds and the comforting flow of the Manatee River, felt like an extension of myself. It was a place where I could be alone with my thoughts, yet connected to something larger. The sun, climbing higher in the sky, cast a golden light through the branches, creating dancing patterns on the ground. The air, filled with the fresh, earthy scent of the forest and the gentle sounds of nature, was like music to my ears. I felt a deep sense of contentment, blissfully unaware that this day would bring an encounter that would forever change my life, challenging everything I believed about the natural world I so dearly loved. A morning of serendipity. On the day that would forever change my life, the world seemed to awaken with a serene promise. I, attuned to the rhythms of nature, rose early while the retreat still slumbered in the hush of dawn. Dressing quietly, I was mindful not to break the peaceful silence enveloping my family's home. Pulling on my father's well-worn deputy sheriff coat, I felt hugged by its comforting weight, connecting me to my father's strength and steadiness. The coat was like a familiar, reassuring presence, its fabric softened by years of wear. Stepping outside, the cool touch of the early spring morning greeted me, contrasting with the warmth of the coat. The retreat was tranquil in these early hours. The air was fresh, tinged with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. Birds began their daily symphony, their soft chirping accompanying my solitary walk. I knew the path to my favorite fishing spot by the Manatee River so well. I could walk it with my eyes closed, each step a dance with the landscape. As I neared the river, the sounds of the waking world became more pronounced. Leaves rustled gently in the distance. The river rippled subtly, creating a soothing, natural symphony. The Manatee River flowed majestically, its waters sparkling under the awakening sun like a cascade of diamonds. The sky, painted in soft blues and pinks, signaled the arrival of a new day. Sunlight pierced through the canopy, casting dancing shadows on the forest floor. Dewdrops sparkled like tiny jewels on leaves and grass, illuminated by the growing light. Reaching my cherished spot, I set down my fishing gear with reverence. This was more than a place to fish. It was my sanctuary, a sacred place where I connected with nature and myself. A corrugated pipe over the water was my seat of contemplation, where I had spent countless hours lost in thought, attuning myself to the language of the river and the forest. Today, I anticipated a quiet session of fishing, a peaceful communion with the river and the life it nurtured. Unbeknownst to me, the serenity of the idyllic morning was about to be shattered. An encounter, so startling and unexpected, was on the horizon, ready to forever alter my understanding of the world around me. As I prepared my fishing rod, the stillness of the morning hung in the air, a delicate balance soon to be disrupted in the most profound way. Disturbance on the riverbank. The morning at the Christian retreat had begun with such tranquility, painting a serene picture around me as I settled at my usual spot by the Manatee River. I started my fishing ritual with calm focus, feeling the river, a constant companion in my life, flow gently, its surface shimmering in the early light. As I cast my line into the water, I was enveloped by a deep connection to the natural world. The rhythmic sound of the water, the gentle of rustling leaves, and the soft chorus of bird calls created a symphony that resonated with my soul. It was a moment of perfect peace, a harmonious snapshot of man and nature intertwined. But this harmony was soon to be disrupted. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly, a slight deviation in the natural rhythm of the forest. Initially, I thought the faint rustling sounds from the riverbank were just wildlife, perhaps a raccoon foraging or a deer passing through. But as the sounds persisted, growing louder and more erratic, a prickle of unease crept up on my spine. The noises were irregular and heavy, like something large moving through the underbrush. The serenity I felt began to dissolve, replaced by a growing apprehension. I strained my ears, trying to decipher the sounds, but the rustling was erratic, a stark contrast to the familiar whispers of the retreat. Then, I felt it. The sensation of being watched. It was an instinctive, primal feeling that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. I scanned the opposite riverbank, searching through dense foliage. The forest, once a source of comfort, now seemed to harbor a hidden observer, an unseen presence that shattered the feel of tranquility. The air grew heavy with tension, the comforting sounds of nature now overshadowed by something unknown. Even the birds seemed to sense it, their melodies faltering in a cautious silence. The river continued to flow, oblivious to the change. But the world around me had shifted, charged with a palpable sense of anticipation. I tried to dismiss the feeling, blaming it on an overactive imagination. But the sense of being watched was relentless. It clawed at my calm, seeping into my consciousness. Every rustle, every snap of a twig amplified my unease, transforming the once peaceful retreat into a landscape filled with foreboding. This was no longer the familiar sanctuary I had known all my life. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the rippling waters, the retreat seemed to hold its breath, waiting. I found myself at a crossroads of emotion, torn between my love for this place and a growing sense of alarm, unaware that I was on the brink of an encounter that would challenge the very fabric of my reality. The unearthly revelation. The unease that had begun to settle over me now thickened into a dense, palpable tension. My senses, heightened by the growing anxiety, became acutely attuned to every nuance of the forest. The retreat, once a comforting haven, seemed to have transformed into a stage for something inexplicable. As I stood there, my fishing rod forgotten in my hand, I peered into the dense thicket across the river. Suddenly, the underbrush parted. What emerged from the shadows was a creature so astonishing, so beyond my understanding, that time itself seemed to freeze. It was a Sasquatch, a being of legend and folklore, standing just 30 yards away. The creature was colossal, towering over 7.5 feet tall. Its presence was overwhelming, radiating a primal, raw power that seemed to resonate through the air. My heart pounded in my chest, a frenetic rhythm echoing my escalating fear. The creature's dark brown hair, thick and unkempt, covered its body like a shaggy mantle. It was long and matted in places, giving the creature a wild, untamed appearance. Its arms, disproportionately long, hung heavily at its sides, the muscles beneath the hair rippling with each subtle movement. Its eyes, dark and deeply set, held a glimmer of intelligence that was unnervingly human. They fixed on me with an intensity that was almost palpable, sending shivers down my spine. The creature's face, mostly obscured by hair, bore a human-like quality, with a pronounced brow and a nose more snout than human. For a few heartbeats, the Sasquatch and I stood frozen, locked in a moment of mutual surprise. The forest around us held its breath, the only sound the soft murmur of the river. Then, as if realizing the intrusion into its world, the creature's demeanor shifted. It began to move, not away, but towards me, with a gait eerily human. Each step was deliberate and powerful, closing the distance between us. Panic surged within me, a primal instinct to flee overtaking all reason. The creature, now fully aware of my presence, quickened its pace. Its movements were fluid yet unnerving, a blend of man and beast that defied the laws of nature as I knew them. The air was filled with the sound of its approach, the snapping of twigs under its heavy footsteps, the rustling of leaves. The creature's breath was audible, a heavy, guttural sound that punctuated the silent air. My mind raced with terror. Images of folklore and tales of woodland monsters swirling chaotically. In that moment, the retreat, my place of peace and sanctuary, had transformed into a scene from a nightmare. I stood at its center, facing a creature of legend and terror. The Sasquatch, once a mere myth, was now a terrifying reality. Its every movement amplified my fear, challenging my understanding of the world and pushing me to the brink of reality I never imagined could exist. A race for survival. The moment of frozen shock shattered as the Sasquatch's heavy footsteps thundered towards me. Each ground-shaking step jolted me, snapping me out of my trance. My heart pounded like a frantic drum, each beat screaming at me to run. Adrenaline surged through me, and I spun on my heels, leaving my fishing gear behind, forgotten. Panic coursed through my veins as I sprinted away from the riverbank. The retreat, once a sanctuary of peace, had transformed into an alien landscape of fear and danger. Behind me, the sounds of the pursuing Sasquatch filled the air, a cacophony of primal grunts and snapping branches. The creature wasn't just following, it was chasing me, its heavy breaths and guttural growls punctuating the tense air. My mind raced with terror. I had heard tales of Sasquatch encounters, but none had ever spoken of such aggression, such relentless pursuit. The forest, once my place of solace, had become a labyrinth of fear, with every tree and shadow seeming to conspire against my escape. Ahead lay the barbed wire fence, making the edge of the retreat. I had climbed it countless times before, but never under such dire circumstances. As I neared the fence, my breath ragged and limbs burning, I dared to glance back. The Sasquatch was closing in, its massive form a terrifying specter among the trees. Its eyes, almost human in their intensity, were locked onto me. Its towering height and the sheer power of its strides diminished the distance between us alarmingly fast. With a burst of desperate energy, I reached the fence. Grasping the cold metal, I ignored the sharp bite of the barbs and scrambled up, the barbed wire tearing at my clothes and skin. The physical pain was lost in the tide of my fear. As I cleared the top and tumbled down the other side, a guttural roar from the creature erupted, filling the morning air with fury. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting through my body, but fear propelled me back to my feet. Risking another glance back, I saw the Sasquatch at the fence, its massive hands gripping the metal, its face contorted in a snarl. For a moment, our eyes met across the barrier, wild fury in the creature's gaze. Then with a final chilling roar, it turned and vanished back into the forest. I stumbled away, my body trembling, my mind reeling from the encounter. The retreat, once a haven of tranquility, now echoed with the sound of my terror and the creature's roars. The chase, brief as it was, had been a harrowing dance with death, a confrontation with a legend that had become all too real. As I made my way back to safety, the weight of what I had experienced bore down on me. A tale too bizarre and terrifying to believe, yet irrefutably real in its horror. Echoes of terror. Shaken to my core, I staggered away from the barbed wire fence, each step away from the encounter site amplifying my disbelief and fear. My body moved on autopilot, driven by an instinctual need for safety, while my mind was ensnared in the horrifying reality of what had just transpired. The retreat, once a symbol of tranquility and childhood memories, now felt tainted, overshadowed by the looming presence of the creature. As I approached my uncle's apartment, the familiar sights of the retreat did little to ease the turmoil within me. The vibrant colors of the morning seemed dim, the cheerful chirping of birds distant and irrelevant. My heart still raced, a relentless reminder of the fear that gripped me. Entering the apartment was like stepping into another world, one blissfully unaware of the nightmares lurking in the pine forest. My family, wrapped in the mundane normalcy of a weekend morning, was oblivious to the seismic shift in my reality. I felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of isolation, a chasm of experience that separated me from them. I tried to speak, to articulate the terror I had encountered, but the world seemed inadequate, too frail to convey the enormity of my fear. My family noticed my distress, their faces etched with concern. But how could I explain? How could I make them understand the dread that clung to me like a second skin? The encounter replayed in my mind, a loop of fear that I couldn't escape. The image of the Sasquatch's piercing eyes, its powerful form, and the guttural sounds it made haunted me. I felt a profound sense of vulnerability, a realization that there were mysteries and dangers in the world that defied understanding. The sanctuary of my uncle's apartment, once a place of warmth and safety, now felt constricting, a cage that held me captive with my fear. The once comforting proximity of my family now felt suffocating. Their presence, a stark reminder of the normalcy my life had lost. As I sat there, amidst the mundane sounds of a family breakfast, I felt a deep, unsettling change within myself. The innocence of my youth, the security of my known world, had been irrevocably shattered. The forest, the river, the retreat itself, they all bore a new, ominous significance. I realized that my experience had transformed me, marked me in a way that was indelible. The encounter with the Sasquatch was not just a moment of fear. It was a profound turning point, a gateway into a world where legends walked and reality was fragile, easily shattered illusion. In the aftermath of my ordeal, I grappled with a sense of loss, the loss of safety, the loss of innocence, and the loss of a world I once believed I understood. As I withdrew into my own thoughts, struggling to process what I had witnessed, I knew one thing for certain. The shadows of the forest had deepened, and with them, the shadows in my heart. In search of the unknown. In the aftermath of my harrowing encounter, I found myself grappling with a myriad of emotions. My family, initially skeptical, became increasingly concerned as they witnessed the depth of my distress. Despite the incredulity of my story, they couldn't ignore the genuine fear in my eyes. Reluctantly, they agreed to accompany back to the site of the encounter, a decision driven as much by a need to understand as to offer me peace of mind. As we ventured into the forest, the retreat seemed to have regained some of its peaceful composure. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor, and the river flowed gently, oblivious to the turmoil it had witnessed. Yet, for me, each step was a foray back into a world where the lines between reality and myth had been irrevocably blurred. We reached the spot where I had encountered the Sasquatch, the air heavy with unspoken tension. We scoured the area, searching for any sign of the creature. Footprints, broken branches, anything that could validate my experience. But the forest, in its inscrutable way, revealed nothing. The underbrush was undisturbed, the ground unmarked, as if the forest had swallowed all evidence of the creature's existence. The lack of physical proof only served to deepen my sense of isolation. My family's attempts at reassurance, their rational explanations, felt hollow against the vivid terror of my memory. The reality of what I had seen and felt stood in stark contrast to the serene normalcy of the forest around us. In the following days, driven by a need for answers and a desperate attempt to make sense of my experience, I turned to research. I delved into books, scoured newspaper archives, and searched the emerging digital world of the internet. I learned of other sightings, other encounters with creatures that defied explanation. The stories varied in detail, but a common thread emerged. I was not alone. These accounts, some tinged with fear, others with wonder, spanned across different regions and times. I read about hikers stumbling upon large, bipedal figures in remote woods, of strange, deep footprints found in unlikely places, and of eerie, unidentified sounds heard in the stillness of the night. Each story was a piece of a larger puzzle, a glimpse into a hidden world that lurked just beyond the veil of the known. This realization brought a small measure of comfort. Knowing that others had experienced similar encounters lessened my sense of isolation. It also ignited a spark of curiosity amidst the embers of my fear. The Sasquatch, a creature of legend, was more than a myth. It was a mystery that beckoned with an enigmatic allure. As I continued my research, I began to feel a shift within myself. The fear, though still present, was now accompanied by a sense of intrigue. I found myself drawn to the stories, to the experiences of others who had glimpsed the unknown and had their reality challenged, just as I had. In this quest for understanding, I found a new purpose, a new path that led into the depths of the unexplained. My encounter with the Sasquatch had opened a door to a world I had never imagined. A world where mysteries roamed in the shadows of the pines. And though the fear lingered, it was now joined by a profound sense of wonder, a realization that the world was far more vast and mysterious than I had ever conceived. Shadows and reflections. Years have passed since my fateful encounter with the Sasquatch at the Christian retreat. The incident, which once consumed every thought, now resides in my memory like a distant, albeit vivid dream. However, the encounter irrevocably changed me. I've become more cautious, my senses perpetually attuned to the subtle whispers of the wilderness. With a newfound protectiveness, I often caution my family about the mysteries and potential dangers lurking in unexplored corners of nature. My obsession with the creature, initially gripping me with fear and curiosity, has evolved over time into a profound respect for the unknown facets of the natural world. I've spent countless hours reading about Sasquatch sightings, immersing myself in the lore and theories surrounding these elusive beings. In my quest for understanding, I reached out to the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, sharing my experience with them. I found a community that not only believed in my account, but also shared similar experiences. This connection provided me with a semblance of solace, a sense that I was not alone in my encounter with the inexplicable. The stories I heard from others echoed my own, each a unique tapestry of awe and fear, woven together by the common thread of encountering the unknown. As time went on, I often found myself drawn back to the retreat, to the very spot by the Manatee River, where my perception of reality had forever been altered. I would sit there, staring at the serene flow of the river, lost in thoughts that bridged the past and present. These visits were a pilgrimage of sorts, a way to connect with the moment that had reshaped my life. Now a man in my later years, I sat once again on the bank of the river, the sounds of the forest around me, a familiar melody. The retreat had changed over the years, but the river and the pines stood timeless and enduring. I reflected on that day long ago, the fear and wonder it had instilled in me, and how it had guided my path ever since. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the water, I stood up to leave. The forest was alive with the sounds of twilight, the rustling of animals, and the gentle breeze through the leaves. But then, as I took one last look at the river, a sound reached my ears. Distant, unidentifiable, and eerily reminiscent of that fateful encounter. I paused, my heart quickening. The sound was faint, perhaps just an animal, but it carried with it the weight of memories and mysteries unsolved. A smile touched my lips, a smile of acceptance and wonder. The Sasquatch, whether a creature of flesh and blood or a specter of the wild, remained a mystery, a reminder that the world held secrets yet to be uncovered. Turning away from the river, I walked back through the forest, the sound echoing in my mind. It was a sound that spoke of unanswered questions and the enduring mystery of the Sasquatch. And as I left the retreat behind, I carried with me the knowledge that some mysteries were not meant to be solved, only appreciated as part of the vast and wondrous tapestry of the natural world.